I'm Greg Kidd. I'm the CEO of Global ID, which works on self-sovereign identity that's portable. And I'm also the co-founder of Hard Yaka, which is a investment company that invests in what we call the sovereignty stack, projects that put people at the center of the universe and build around that, as opposed to top-down structures where people are under corporations or governments. That's our investment thesis.
Very cool. Okay, so let's just get right into it. As I'm sure a lot of you already know, right before the Christmas holiday, the SEC launched its lawsuit against Ripple, essentially saying that XRP was a security and Ripple had been involved in selling unregistered securities for the past 8 years. Greg, I know you have some very strong opinions on this. Why don't we start with your hot take?
Well, first off, I'm an ex-regulator myself. I work for the Federal Reserve at the Board of Governors in the payments group. And just my observation is, and again, I'm not a regulator now, but that just wasn't the way we did things at the Fed. You didn't launch litigation on the last day before the commissioner of your organization resigned, just especially going into like a new administration. I mean, Ripple's been around for 8 years. There's been a long time to set clear rules, and then you could have arguments or discussions over what behaviors need to change to meet the rules. But to actually just file an enforcement action out of the blue on the day that you resign, so you're not around to actually take the heat for the consequences of what you've done, and then you just sail off into the holidays and a new administration. That's kind of an unprecedented situation. The question is, what was the reason after 8 years that required an urgent enforcement action just on the last day of under a particular leadership? And so this is a highly unusual situation, just to start with, in terms of the conduct of the SEC, independent of the substantive issues of the case. So it does have me scratching my head as to why this timing, why in this manner, and then we can just climb down into the specifics of the actual case. What's known as the Howey test, which is the test for whether something is a security or is a currency. And really, from my point of view, it comes down to whether an organization like the SEC thinks that people out there can't tell the difference between investing in a gold mine, which has its own stock, which truly is a security, versus gold, which is pretty clearly not a security. And so in the case of Ripple, as you said, Ripple was a company that did raise money from venture capital. It does have investors. I'm one of those investors. I know the difference between when I'm investing in a company versus when I'm investing in something that might have been associated with that company, but is not an investment contract of that company. And that's XRP, which I'm also a holder of. And the SEC has taken the point of view that people don't know the difference, and it is suing to recover $1.3 billion on behalf of those investors, and in the process is destroying tens of billions of dollars of value for those investors. And it does remind me of a quote from Ronald Reagan, who said the scariest words in the English language is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So when somebody comes to help me as an investor, which is the primary mission of the SEC, and helps me by destroying, 10 times the amount of value that they're quibbling over, you got to scratch your head, because that just doesn't really make sense from a public policy point of view. It doesn't make sense from a financial point of view. And so it really, begs the question. So that's,
Well, I mean, speaking of that question, what do you think the goal of the SEC was, right? Because generally speaking, they're there to make sure regulations are followed. They're there to make sure the rules are followed. And ultimately, their responsibility is to protect the consumer. So what do you think they were trying to get out of this particular case, especially in the context of, like you said, dropping it right before the holidays and right before this administration is moving on?
Well, to me, this feels like a turf battle. Again, I come from the U.S. regulatory industry, and there's always a question of like, what does the Fed do versus the OCC versus state regulators? And in this case, the question is, who gets to be the boss of cryptocurrency? Is it FinCEN? Is it the IRS? Is it like some other federal regulator? Or in this case, the SEC is saying like we want to be the boss of crypto. Yet we don't want to like lay out like clear rules and whatnot. But this clearly is a chance for them to say, we get to say, have a say, a big say about how crypto works. Yet at the same time, we don't have the responsibility for putting out a clear set of rules, even though it's been 8 years. And they could clarify like, why is Ripple, in their mind, an investment contract, but Ethereum or Bitcoin is not, and also give guidance to all the other companies that are arguably in the same position as Ripple. It could be a Filecoin or a Stellar, Tether, Brave. I mean, those are all companies where there was a stock by the founding company, and then tokens have been issued, and those tokens have been sold to members of the public, and are held broadly, not just by accredited investors. And so, the ironic thing here is if you read what the mission is of the SEC, it's to protect investors, to maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitate capital formation. If you go through each of those 5 things, protecting investors, is this fair? Is this orderly? Is this efficient? Does this promote capital formation? And in every one of those checkboxes, this action achieves exactly the opposite outcome. Investors have been harmed. This certainly isn't fair because you can't understand why Ripple and not Tether or not like Stellar, not like any of those other lists or Bitcoin or Ether. You're not making clear what the distinctions are. It is certainly not efficient or orderly. I mean, there's been chaos in the marketplaces. Folks don't know whether to list or delist. There's problems with liquidities. Loans are being called. I mean, if you wanted to create a situation that was a parallel to like having like Lehman Brothers go down without clear and orderly wind down, I can't think how you could create more chaos in the marketplaces than just to file an enforcement action with no context, on the last day of, the commissioner's leadership of the SEC.